Every ecosystem has a host of organisms that thrive and develop together. They are involved in numerous cycles that overlap and depend on each other. Humans are part of this web and can influence every other species involved. Plants and animals have been adapting to their environments for millions of years. Species have survived by adjusting to the climate, finding food, and avoiding danger in their immediate surroundings. Organisms do not live in isolation. They live within ecosystems. An ecosystem is a habitat in which plants, animals, and microorganisms interact with each other and their non-living surroundings. Ponds, beaches, fields, and forests are ecosystems. An ecosystem includes the biotic, or living components, and the abiotic, or non-living components. The living organisms in an ecosystem are known as its biota. Together, the biota make up a community. For a species to survive, it must have a niche in the community where it can find food necessary for its survival and reproduction. In every ecosystem are two types of organisms, producers and consumers. The producers, called autotrophs, produce their own food. Photosynthesizing plants and some microorganisms are autotrophs. Consumers are called heterotrophs. Herbivores eat plants only, and they are primary consumers. Carnivores are secondary consumers. They eat meat and live off primary consumers. The consumers' fungi and bacteria are also called decomposers because they eat dead and decaying organisms. They break down grass, tree trunks, and animal remains so that nutrients return to the soil. The producers, consumers, secondary consumers, and decomposers make up an interdependent community within an ecosystem. One way they interrelate is through the food web. The food web has many overlapping food chains of producers and consumers. For example, on the African plain, producers such as grass grow in abundance. Herbivores, such as antelope, eat the grass. Carnivores, such as lions, kill and eat part of the antelope. Jackals eat other parts of the remains. Worms, ants, and bacteria consume what is left. Since most species eat and are eaten by more than one other species, food chains link together in a food web. And changes affecting one group ultimately affect several others. Food chains exist in all ecosystems. Many cycles also take place within the abiotic or non-living components of an ecosystem. First, the producers use sunlight to produce or make food, which provides or supplies them with energy. Then it passes along the food chain to consumers, the herbivores, carnivores, and decomposers. The different feeding or trophic levels form an energy pyramid. As the energy passes from level to level, less and less of the original energy captured by producers is available to organisms at the higher levels. Biologists estimate that about 10% of the energy in one trophic level is transferred to the next trophic level, and so on. Where does the rest go? Some is used for digestion, work, growth, and reproduction, and the rest gets dissipated as heat. When the energy is passed to the next trophic level, such as from the herbivore that eats the plant to the carnivore that eats the herbivore, only 1% of the original energy is available. At each trophic level is a decrease of about 90% of available energy. Despite this reduction, an ecosystem sustains itself because the biomass, or number of organisms, at each trophic level is also reduced by at least 90%. The biomass at the bottom level is so great, and it replenishes itself so quickly, that it can sustain the organisms at the higher levels. While energy flows through an ecosystem, other substances get recycled and are not lost. Necessary for all living organisms, water is constantly recycled. It may lie in a lake before flowing into the sea. It may evaporate into the atmosphere to become water vapor before the wind blows it away and it falls as rain. Water can remain in the soil before a plant absorbs it. Water is constantly being recycled through ecosystems and the entire biosphere. The biosphere is any part of the earth that supports life and includes the land, air, and water. The carbon cycle is based on carbon dioxide, or CO2, but it's very similar to the energy flow. Plants use carbon dioxide to make food. Animals eat the plants and absorb some of the carbon into their bodies. Animals release the carbon into the air through a process called respiration, and the process begins again. Carbon is also trapped in the fossil fuels oil and coal. When burned, the fuels release the carbon into the atmosphere. Over time, carbon dioxide has built up in the atmosphere to produce what scientists call the greenhouse effect. Some scientists believe too much buildup is causing global warming, which can lead to climate change and severe weather. Ecosystems can be overwhelmed by heavy concentrations of any element entering it. For example, nitrogen makes up 78% of the Earth's atmosphere, but very small amounts are in the oceans, soil, and organisms. Plants, bacteria, and decomposers recycle it. In recent years, farmers have added large amounts of nitrogen fertilizer to soils to improve crop production. This practice has increased the acidity of soils and the pollution of waterways. Phosphorus is also a required nutrient for plants, and like nitrogen, farmers have added it to fertilizer. Runoff from farmland containing nitrogen and phosphorus overstimulates the growth of algae in bodies of water, depleting the oxygen and suffocating the aquatic life. Did you know? Fertilizers containing nitrogen and phosphorus flowing down the Mississippi River into the Gulf of Mexico have created a yearly dead zone. Its oxygen level is so low that fish and other organisms cannot survive. This dead zone is roughly the size of New Jersey.